panel discussion, mapping prejudice, tolerance, and justice, and exploring the lenses through which these are presented in children's books. On the panel, we have Nandita, Basu, Likla, Lall, and Kripa, Bhatia. The session will be moderated by Colin, Kelman. Nandita is a comic book artist and a trained Western classical pianist. She enjoys teaching music, playing the violin and cello in addition to the piano. She has written several short graphic stories that have been published in different anthologies. She stares at the sky, eats gummy bears, and plays music and draws. Kya baat hai? She likes to have conversations with animals and children in that order. Children, more than adults. Okay, there is more than adults as well. She likes to have conversations with animals and children. Adults, you are like useless. Okay, super. Being an ever-curious learner and a voracious reader, Likla found her calling as a writer. She writes books for children about art with Art First. She's the author of the IPP award-winning Art is a Verb and the evocative Somnath Hor Wounds. Likla also writes for Little Light on a curriculum that encourages children to connect with themselves and nurture the joy within. Interested in experimenting with narrative formats, Likla is a creator at Panic Not, a storytelling collective and community. She is also a frequent contributor to WinC, Women in Comics magazine in New York. Beyond an ardent love for books, she finds joy in a lifelong practice of dance and movement. Yep. Kripa is a children's book illustrator based in Mumbai. She took up teaching art and design after completing fine art from Sir J.J. School of Art. She has been an art educator and worked with institutions like Srishti School of Art, Design and Technology. She's a visiting faculty at the Ecole Intuit Lab in Mumbai. Is that how you pronounce it? Ecole? Yeah. In most of her books, city and art have been recurring themes as she's working on representing urban realism, thus enabling children to view their cities with new perspectives. Kripa's characters are real people derived from her association with the grassroots. Her art is rooted in her engagement with her city, Mumbai, its children, people, and their problems. The session is going to be moderated by Colin. Colin has been a teacher in the middle school, high school, in pre-university programs and undergraduate programs, where he has taught English language, literature, theory of knowledge, literary criticism, and phonetics. His experience beyond that of a DP coordinator includes work as a head of department, IGCSE coordinator, and examiner in theory of knowledge and IB and English with the IB. His education at various levels includes studying English literature, psychology, and linguistics. After earning his postgraduate degree in English, inclusive of linguistics and literature, his work on the editing of prose writings of the English Renaissance led to a research degree in English. Above all else, Colin loves to read and teach the love of reading, especially close reading. He's particularly partial to poetry, travel writing, and nature writing. Please join me in welcoming our guest today. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you, couple, for that lovely introduction. And I must say, I'm very happy to be back here. I did this first in 2018. And what's lovely about this is that every year, it's a new set of authors that I get to talk to, new creators of works, and that gives me great pleasure. And this time, I'll be talking to these creators on mapping 3 ideas. They seem serious. They are serious. And I hope to draw them out and give you a really enriching experience from discussing these very important ideas. That is prejudice, tolerance, and justice. And before I go further, I just want to also say that the books that couple named, this is one of them when you look out for it in the marketplace. This is Nandita's book. They're in the young adult category, and we'll try and focus on this category as well as on these books. And the other is this lovely book, Wounds, which is by Likla and Kripa. So look out for this as well, and we'll try and bring out some aspects of the book as well in these books in our discussion. I'd like to plunge straight away, if you don't mind, into it with I'd like to set the relevance for it. And I know a couple brought up some of those things, and so I'll just start with India itself. These ideas, tolerance, prejudice, justice, why do they matter in India today? I know they matter around the world, but specifically in India today, if we can set the relevance for our audience, if you'd like to begin, maybe Nandita, and then we'll take it around and then see where we go with that.
Good morning, Colin. Good morning to everyone here. Actually, it's a very relevant question, but then again, because I deal with students from all over the world. Okay, for me, after a point, there is no difference between an Indian, an American, or European, or somebody from Kazakhstan. And I feel tolerance, ideas of acceptance runs across the world. In some countries, maybe, because the awareness is a little more, children have started, I deal with children, so I'm using that term, children have started accepting, differences amongst themselves. In India, the problem is, again, problem is not the right word maybe, but the main issue is we don't like talking about a lot of things. And therefore, there's no awareness. And that doesn't mean children are not aware about it. It's not like adults are not aware of it. But since we don't talk about it openly, it becomes a bigger issue. That's the only difference, I feel.
Thank you, Nandita. Has that been your experience as well, Kripa?
So I would like to talk as three people today. One as a children's book writer, illustrator, which I'm very new to. So I wouldn't comment much from that person, as that person. But I would like to tell you that I've been a reader for a very long time, for the longest time. So I would, whatever question, the answers to the question will come from that person, the reader in me. And also as an educationist, because I've been teaching like Nandita in a few schools and colleges, but mostly art. But that's the space where we are dealing with these issues the most today. And I'm going to talk mostly about children's picture books, children's literature in specific. I love quoting this, the film Chitralekha, a very old film. I'm sure many of y'all, the younger people, may not have watched it, but there's a beautiful song by, written by Sahir Ludhianvi, Sansar se bhage firte ho, Bhagwan ko tum kya paoge. There are these beautiful lines in the Antara, which says, ye paap hai kya, ye punya है क्या, रीतों पर धर्म की मोहरें हैं, हर युग में बदलते धर्मों को कैसे आदर्श बनाओगे, which means that what is right and what is wrong, there's a stamp of morality on right and wrong, which changes with every passing generation, with every coming generation. So how are you going to idealize a certain moral, which in a certain epoch? And that is very relevant today because we are facing criticisms, when it comes to books like Roald Dahl's, or when it comes to books like Dr. Seuss, and so many, books which are written at a very different time, which are criticized today, which is great. We need to critique them. We need to criticize them. But, so books need to be written in today's context. We need to write them, but there is no right and wrong. Again, to idealize something, what we are writing today, and say this is what we are writing is right, is not true, because what we are writing today may not make sense to the coming epochs. So that is my, when we are talking about prejudice and we are talking about stereotypes, we also need to remember that they were written at a very different, in a different context. They were written, so yeah, I think that's, I'm just setting the tone for the conversation right now, and perhaps Likla can articulate.
Yeah, and Likla also, if you can also tag on, maybe if you can address what Kripa said, that how do we, while talking about this, how do we try and gain some longevity into the future as a creator of art and books yourself?
Thank you. So, what Kripa said, right? We are writers of the times we live in, right? I think probably what's most worrying to me is when you talk about things like prejudice and tolerance. Being an adult myself, unfortunately, a lot of the way I see the world and the ideas I have come from my experience of it. And I find more and more that the children, and this, I mean, from when I was young and when, probably for all of you, we did listen to our parents, our teachers, our books, and those were the ideas that helped us navigate the world, right? So as writers, I think of today, the diversity of books, of characters, of book friends, of worlds that we have access to gives maybe a vaster world for children to think about, come to their own judgment of what is right and what is wrong to them, perhaps, and then be able to navigate their experiences rather than simply the way that a society or a school or a family structure might dictate for them. And that's where I see the relevance of probably, and all of us, we've been talking about this yesterday as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all very much for that response. In fact, I had a question about its relevance to children, but I'll skip that because, we're on to an interesting point that I think Kripa started about the decisions we make in our work. So, and what's interesting about this panel is we have a substantial amount of experience of different communication forms, different communication modes, not just language, to be able to tell this. So I'm really excited about this, the answers to this question about, given that there's prejudice, tolerance, justice to be spoken about and talked about in nuanced ways, I'd like to hear from our panelists something specific about the creative choices they make. And I know our students here, especially the older students as well, would be really interested to know some of the creative choices that you've made over the years or modified or changed, and particularly perhaps in the latest of your creations, to be able to send this across, into the world, across time and space, to reach an audience. So perhaps Kripa, if you'd like to start.
The creative choices I make, well, so the book that I'm currently working on is a book, my third book on Kolivada. Kolivadas of Bombay, and my third book, since I've come to my third book, I think there's been a lot of research that's gone into this book, and when I say research, a lot of walking, in Kolivada spaces and communicating with the locals and the Koli community and befriending them, and so that's the kind of research that sort of goes into the making of a book, maybe 7-8 months or so. So the publisher of the book, the editor of the book, when we were discussing the character, the protagonist of the book is a girl from the Koli community. Her name is Meera. And so Meera is from a fishing village in Mumbai. So the minute we think about village, we get this idea that a girl from the village would be dressed in a certain attire. So the editor of the book we had a long discussion about what she should wear, because the first few sketches that I made was Meera in ruffled hair and rolled up jeans, and she's got bruises on her knees, and she's all fierce and warrior-like. And the editor she said, but the idea of Meera in my head was this sweet little girl with a frock or a dress or a salwar kameez, because she's from a Kolivada. And I said, but that's not true. The Koli community, unlike, how we our idea of secularism, we talk about secularism so easily. But, from my understanding of the Kolis and being with them for the last 3 or 4 years now and sketching them, what I've understood is how a community can be so syncretic and coexist in a space. There are, the Golfa Devi temple where the Kolis go and worship. The Golfa Devi Mandir is where you see a Muslim priest, and where there are Hindu worshippers. And there's a Catholic priest who performs on certain days. So these are the kind of syncretic spaces that exist. And when we think about the Koli community wearing that traditional partition sari with the V-shaped the dupatta, that's a very Bollywoodized idea of the Kolis, which they only wear. And again, that attire changes from place to place. In certain Kolivadas in Mumbai, where the East Indian community is more prevalent, their attire is very different. It's a 3-piece attire. And which they wear, that earlier one that I referred to is only worn on festivals. They're not worn every day. So what the Kolis wear every day is convenient nylon saris, because they're easy to wash and wear and just dry. And their houses are very small, so they just have a string. They don't have cupboards like us where we stack clothes. They just have a string where they have 2 pairs of clothes, and they dry them and they wear the same thing, because they have to be in the water through the day. So we have to be practical when we think about. No, I mean they have to be practical when they think about clothing. So when we had this conversation, it opened up that sort of understanding about a child from a certain community, and these are the kind of stereotypes I think. I think we are trying to break and bring into our books.
Thank you, Kripa. That was really powerful. The prejudice that we sometimes have in envisioning people, and I know it must be difficult for people who illustrate as well, because you might be able to avoid that in language. You might, work with some level of ambiguity, but you've got to commit yourself to something as well when you illustrate too. And I'm happy that you spoke to our audience about all of that. That was almost encyclopedic, in fact, for many of us, for me as well, what you just said in that couple of minutes. So, Likla, would you like to tell us about some of those creative choices that you've had to make in representing these ideas?
Thank you. So I'd like to actually talk about Somnath Aur Wounds. Personally, for me, I learn a lot from each book that I write. There's an incredible amount of research, and that's one of the parts I really, really enjoy about my work. It's not just about what the reader will take away from it for me in terms of the experience. And while researching, this is that time period pretty much during the freedom struggle, right before India gets her independence, and then I don't know why her is even appropriate as a country. So India as a country was to get its independence, and then the life of the artist to continue living in a free India after that. And I got to think a lot about that time period and learn from it. And so Somnath Aur, when he was young, even before he became an artist as he would, it was his job to document certain farmer struggles in northeast India. And at that point, similarly, the whole farmer protest was going on, where all the farmers had come into Delhi. And there was this thread that I could see from the past to the present of why the form that protests take. And so I mean, we've put a lot of that in there, but I also didn't see it as something that I had to dictate and say, hey, you know, this is the thread of it, because this was the lesson I learned from it, from what I know and what I continue to learn. And other readers will probably take away different things, different learnings. I'm also very aware that, so my grandparents were in the freedom struggle. I have that still generation connect, the stories that they told me. Probably the next generation is one more divorced from that particular time period that controls so much of the India that we live in today. So I would not assume to make that judgment for them and say, hey, this is the way that it was. I think there are a lot of like historical books and references that I would hope that they would want to go and read after this, other artists' works in that time period, and come to their own judgment of what was happening and how it's relevant to their life and their futures as well. And I think that's where probably, and Kripa, if you want to add to this, having, and a picture does that so beautiful. We're able to say so much on one page about a particular period of Somnath Hore's life without having to say too much. Right, Kripa, do you want to talk about that?
Yes, I think a picture book biography, especially a 13-page biography, is where it's not a page turner, right? So I mean, we have the challenge of, especially an artist, when we're writing about an artist who's led an illustrious life of up to 96, the age of 96. So we're trying to pack in at least 10 to 15 years of his life into one page. So, which does not mean that an illustrator is cramming the page with all the details. Well, I started off that way. That's how I start, and filling up the page with all the information, all the research that we had, which is quite a lot, and then carefully reducing and removing the elements which can be imagined by the child and which needs to be taken further by the child and gone ahead with their own research. And that's the difficult part. I think that's where we had to work together, Likla and I, and Shambhavi, who's the designer of the book, and where the careful reduction was the process of the team.
Thank you. Yes, and interestingly, perhaps what I noticed the other day, I had a chance to reread the book and look at it more closely, is again how I see that there's a deliberate decision to avoid getting into and I spoke to Likla about this yesterday as well, into a discussion or into, a blame, placing blame on someone for doing it. The focus has been significantly on the artist, on Somnath Hore's work, and the pain he suffered. And what's relevant to our panel, I would say, and would you agree, a sense of justice that he was thinking hard about, and pain? Would you say that it was that? Yes? Yeah, that, and you see that coming through, and it'll be great if people who've read the book and looked at it can also participate when we open it up to questions. But now, Nandita's been waiting, and Nandita's done both, and a slightly different book in that there's a substantial number of pages that Nandita's had to work on, create, and she's done both aspects of communication in the work. So Nandita, what creative choices, both as a writer, and I also know that you love music and you're a musician, and your last book that we looked at here as well, the piano, came through in a similar way. You were working on both. What are some of the creative choices that you make to bring out these ideas of justice or tolerance or prejudice and talk about them?
I have a very simple process. My first priority is tell a good story. I do not think about, I need to make a statement, I need to teach the world something. I don't want to teach anybody anything. I want to tell everyone a good story. If you like a good story, you will relate to the characters. That's where I start. Now, that doesn't mean a statement cannot be made, but I usually like it subtle. And that's where my music comes in, because I am kind of trained in Western classical music. There's a lot of subtleties there, so I think that kind of flows into the process. In this particular book, the main character, she's non-binary, and in fact, I wasn't very sure I wanted to make the character non-binary, simply because my fear was somebody's going to read the book and think this is a statement that's being made. It's a box to check off. But I went ahead with it because I actually come across kids who are non-binary. They exist around me. I teach them. I have a conversation with them. The reason it's such a big issue today is because we are not treating it as normal. Would you talk about it if it was a kid who just identified as feminine? You wouldn't. It's not cool or whatever. I mean, it's just there. It's the ordinary. This is something we have already boxed up. And I just want it unboxed. She's not a character who has fallen out of space. She's like any other kid who identifies as a boy or a girl. Same emotions, same stuff. She exists. And I hope 5 years down later, we don't ever have to talk about the character is non-binary. I want to make it boring. That's where I come from. That's just where I come from.
Yesterday we talked about in the session yesterday by the juries. We talked about books with a rushed ending, and Nandita's book is a superb example of something which is where the ending actually it came from my son when he read the book twice, and he told me that the book does not give you a happy or a sad ending. And that's these are struggles which go on for life, and yet there is the element where the child finds a comforting friend who he can confide in. So I think that is the beauty of a book like this, which does not have a rushed ending.
Yes, indeed. In fact, uncannily enough, my next point to Nandita was in fact about the ending, which I have here. Almost towards the end, thank you, almost towards the end, you don't solve everything. You solve some of them, but some things are left open. And I remember Rumi saying, maybe I won't have a friend, and she's trying to come to terms with that. Maybe if you'd like to take it on from there, that aspect of the ending.
I can't really remember the name of this author. She's a famous author, but she's written something like, we all want the lost puppy to come back home. We all want to find our lost love again. I'm sorry, life is not like that. And it doesn't make it dark or bleak. It is what it is. Ideally, one day I would love to write Lord of the Rings, because it's fantastic. But I don't think I have the skill set to write a book like that. But in the meanwhile, I feel life is happening and stories are happening in each moment. Each moment right now is the story. The only thing is, we are looking for some sort of an excitement, an idea of excitement, right? But this very moment is already a story itself. How it pans out for each one of us is different, so that works out in a different way. And life is like that. I mean, what is the extraordinary that happens in life every day? Nothing in that sense, right? But yet we are living, the same struggles go on. I mean, a character like Rumi, who is non-binary, there is no solution. It's not like, after 5 years, the whole world will embrace her and say, oh, please come out and be yourself. The whole world will not even let you be you. Whoever you are, you might be, straight, gay, you're not allowed to be who you are. Everybody has some idea. So where is the conclusion in life? It's a movement, and you have to capture that movement. That's where I come from. So it doesn't have to end. It just moves on to another flow, another story, another moment. That's where it is.
That's beautiful. And in fact, Rumi it doesn't end with Rumi saying, "Oh, I've overcome all the intolerance against me," and she's trying to make sense of that. Yeah, that's beautifully done in the book. And similarly, with wounds, I think there's a similar kind of idea that I saw. Maybe Likla and Kripa would like to correct me. That towards the end of the book, almost at the end, there's a picture of Somnath and his signature also, and just above that is a little statement that he carried the pain with him. He didn't end. Wherever he died, I found that quite interesting. That's the final or near final idea or message that we were left with. And I wanted to know the thoughts or the ideas behind doing that very powerful thing. I think maybe you can even hold it up, Likla, to the audience with his signature as an almost endorsement for that idea of pain. And if you'd like to talk about that.
So the purpose that this page, yes, please, serves is, as mentioned, it's a very short biography, so we can't say everything, and some of the highlights of his life remain there. But yeah, for sure, I think this statement is at least how I was looking at his works. And I think Somnath is interesting in the sense that when we're talking about prejudice, tolerance, justice, they're very much like labels in a way, right? These larger concepts that don't say really one thing at all, but encapsulate larger ideas. And pain and wounds was something like that for him too. It was not that he saw all of this horror in his life, and he didn't say, "Hey, here's my art, and my art is to show you that we're in pain." It wasn't to say, "Hey, this is current affairs, and this is what." It was something, a trauma that stayed with him, and it was through his art, through his entire life, whether we're talking about sculptures and the way he worked with metal, the use and the verbs stand out to me. He almost tortured the metal into creating what we term as art. Printmaking as well. He played with paper a lot. He wounded it, and it was his exploration of what I've called in the book one of the great mysteries of life. Right? It's something that's really regular, and that's where the book starts. As kids, we all fall down. We've all had those bruises and cuts, and yet we treat it as this faraway external grand thing of something that happens in only war, or I'm not sure, these big situations, when they're very much part of normal life. And that's what he investigated through his art. And that was probably what the statement was. Do you want to add to it?
I think Somnath is the perfect example of an artist arriving at abstraction. Because at the age of 96, he's still engaging with the same concept of wounds, which he started when he started with his artistic practice. There are three stages, three artistic processes. Three artistic mediums that he engaged with when he started. Initially, he was a printmaker, and as a printmaker, he was depicting the sorrow of the people, the suffering of the people, the Bengal famine, the Tebaga movement, the farmers' revolt, and he was depicting them in a realistic manner. You would see sketchbooks of his where he is extensively documenting the farmers' plight, the dying people, and you can see emaciated figures. You can see people in his works. This was his early part of his life, and then he moves on to sculpture, where the medium becomes the victim, where he is hammering the sculpture. He is hitting the sculpture and almost trying to feel what the pain would be like. What the people felt. So he is victimizing the medium. And then comes the most beautiful part, where he becomes the medium himself, where the abstraction flows in. So, and then the later part, where the wound series, is where it becomes so abstract that he becomes the wound himself. Yeah, so he carried the wounds within him, is, I think, the perfect example of an artist who engaged for 96 years of his life. He engaged with the same subject. There were Chitu Prasad and other artists who moved on to other themes and other works, but Shomnath were engaged in the same, and he became it.
Thank you for that. And indeed, I hope you realized it's quite an interesting, coincidence and panel that we have here people who are creating art about people who've created art. And I must say, even in Rain Must Fall, there is a theme of the artist as well, the idea of creation too within that. So I'd love to have had a little more time, but I know we've got to open it up to the audience. What I'll do is, I have a question here that I wanted to direct to the panelists, but I want to open it up as well so that we have those 10 minutes. And I'll ask the question. Maybe they'd like to take it on. Maybe someone from the audience would like to take it on in participation with them. And that is specifically with tolerance and where we are. Based on our climate, we might think that tolerance is a great thing, an aspirational thing. It doesn't seem sufficient to me, especially for a country like India. Is tolerance the goal? And so is it sufficient for some place like India, tolerance? And what lies beyond tolerance that all of us, all of you would like to explore in your work? And I'll stop there and open it up to the audience for questions in the last 10 minutes that we have. So over to the audience. Do we have a mic there? Would you like to use?
I think that beyond a lot of the discussion in schools around the world has moved beyond tolerance to belonging, and a concept that we're not just putting up with each other or respecting each other out of a sense of knowing that that's the right thing to do, but welcoming and creating a space in which people feel seen and heard and felt and celebrated, and part of a larger whole rather than two separate wholes agreeing to respect and tolerate each other.
Thank you, Susie, for that. Maybe one of our panelists would like.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. Completely agree with you. I'm just going to go a step further. I think it's time everyone, and not just children, it's time to, we elevate humanity to the, it's like a superior species. It's time to involve the entire planet and mean every sentient being on it. That is the need of the hour. It's not about just tolerance. It's about a compassion that understands all of us are tied to each other, not just the two-legged humans sitting here, everything alive on this planet.
I think tolerance is a very anthropocentric word. And the best kind of examples, I mean, nature is a great teacher for, to break that sort of a perception that we have, that we, it comes from the word belonging, like you said, it belongs to me. What belongs to you is not really yours, right? Right? So, I mean, nature can teach us that. And so many of our beautiful books by Bijal and so many lovely writers were writing, not just on nature, but so many of our books are doing that now, trying to break away from the stereotypical understanding from, which comes from an anthropocentric view.
Yes, we have a question there. Yes, Manish.
So I just would love to hear from the panelists on whether you think prejudice, tolerance, and justice is improving or going backwards, right? I mean, nostalgia is usually amnesia, right? So there was no golden age when all of these existed. So would just love to hear from all of three of you, or maybe all four of you, Colin, on whether you think we're headed in some direction which is different from the past, in a better direction.
I'm going to kind of quote Tagore here. He has a quote, something like, with every child that is born, God shows he has not lost his hope in humanity. And that's the truth. The children I teach today, they are far more compassionate, they have far more awareness, and it's so beautiful, because sometimes when I hear them talk about things, when I see them deal with animals, it's amazing. And nobody has taught it to them. It's almost like they've been born with it. And I'm like, okay, it's not going to end. The world is not ending. It's perfect. So I am so hopeful.
Any of our students particularly, or any students from anywhere, if you have a question, ask your question. We'll try and add to it and help you along as well. Yeah, go ahead, Nandita.
To all the students here, my question would be, does it even matter to you that we are talking about it? Because maybe in your own classroom, it doesn't matter if you have somebody who is different from you. So does it seem like a bizarre?
Any students?
I think we have one brave enough. Yes, I think we should give him a clap first for the.
Yeah, I guess it half matters is what I would say, because I am lucky enough to be able to be exposed through stories like yours or other authors, where I know for a fact that there are people who experience prejudice, people who require us justice, and a level of tolerance required across India, across the world, for different kinds of things. But I don't experience it myself. I don't see it myself every day. So I'd say it matters to me, but only at a level where I feel slightly disconnected from what's actually happening. I'm merely just a spectator for it. And for me, my opinion is that these all need to exist, these all need to be fixed. But that's pretty much it.
Yeah, that's a really powerful. Yeah, I think Paro has a question, and then I think I saw Ishan as well at the back there. Yes, sir.
Thank you for a very enlightening and hopeful discussion on a very important topic. Nandita, you said that the hope that comes with every child being born, and that they are much more inclusive. Even accepting is a prejudicial word. Certainly, tolerance is. So, where does it come? When and where does that prejudice start creeping in? Do you think?
That's hard to kind of exactly pinpoint. I think all of us, that's, I mean, the human kind of frailty we all suffer from. We want to get out of a box, yet we have created a box, perhaps even for ourselves. Okay? So it's very hard to kind of pinpoint. However, like, I'm going to come back to the present generation, really, the children. They have a different kind of mindset. It perhaps comes from exposure to more material, and social media has its drawbacks, but then it also has a lot of advantages. And I feel the first space which helps them open out is through social media, because they are experiencing ideas which are not theirs, maybe. They suddenly come upon somebody who's different, but it's like, oh, hey, it's not too bad. And it's not being taught. It's happening very organically. So that's where I think the huge difference is. So let's say somebody, is in a family where it's difficult to talk about certain, gender orientations, they may not be able to talk about it in their family, so they're already carrying that baggage. Yet, right now in this world, we have an option of a window that opens out to a world, perhaps to a space which we are not even aware of. And suddenly, there is like, oh, there are 10 other people who, are supporting me. So that kind of balances out, those prejudices which may have stayed, crept in, and like remained forever. So that's where the balancing happens. But your question was something different, but I don't think one can pinpoint. All of us interacting with each other manage to leave behind a little fragrance. Sometimes it's a very bad one. So maybe we should be mindful of the way we are also interacting with each other. I think.
I agree. I want to say that I still carry so many prejudice inside me,
Yeah.
and these sort of discussions are very important to break free from
Right.
that.
So perhaps, unknowingly we are passing it on.
And maybe I just want to add that to Manish's question, because he asked all of us, that I think the way that a measure of showing that we're moving forward, I think, is communication. And I think events like this and the ability to have people come together and to say things and talk about it in an open forum I think is a good measure of that. And the more we have, the better, and the more frequently we do, the better. And I think, Isha, if you can just squeeze in one couple, is it okay? Yes, Ishan, please.
Yeah, so I was thinking about these words, and like, me as well as all the students here are really privileged to be taught these words, but like with formal definitions, but our exposure to it is, stuff like field trips and stuff like that. So there's a really big gap in education as well as wealth, and like there are different definitions based on these words. So how do you think like across the entire education, like Indian education system, these words can be taught or prejudices can be broken?
No, I went to a rather privileged school as well. However, I didn't have the good fortune of being exposed to these words. Everything is evolving, everything is in motion. So, what was more easily there 10 years ago may be just like a scratch on the surface. You will have a lot more because everything is changing. Like I said, technology, 10 years later, something else will come up. So, as opportunities and things open up, there'll be more access. What I had 10 years ago is not something you can even relate to. Somebody before me would be like, oh my God, this is like a privilege that you're being able to talk about such things on a stage here. So this is just passage of time, and how to go about it, like going back to it, like the more we talk about it, yeah, the more we write about it, and somewhere consciously, if we can all, you don't have to agree with each other. You don't even have to like the other person. That's perfectly fine. But I think it's a good thing to just acknowledge, let's say, just give each other space. I mean, you don't have to like me. You don't have to buy my book. But you don't have to... You don't have to read my book and like it or, say, oh, you're such a great... You know what I'm trying to say? But just allow me the space to write. Let me allow you the space to be. Ask your question. I think it's sufficient for things to move. Even for children who don't go to privileged spaces and schools like this one. It's a filter effect. You don't know where it's moving. It's the butterfly effect. I think everybody knows about the butterfly effect, right? It's that. Let the butterfly flap its wings. Somewhere it's going to come in. Just trust it to happen. But be a part of the flapping. That's important.
I love that, the idea of motion, and that's what life is, right? And there's another word I would like to offer you, since we're talking about words, and it's curiosity. And I think it goes hand in hand with that. There is no like one opinion, one life, one experience, one perspective. And be curious, learn about other people, learn about yourself. I think that, yeah.
I would also just like to lastly say that there are different kinds of books which are written, and there are also books which are very abstract, which do not give, solve all these issues directly, which allow children to ponder over these for a long time on every page. And books like which introduce these themes through art, through tribal works, through tribal voices, or even writers who write in very abstract manner. I can think of so many writers who are doing that. We've, Jerry Pinto, I can, top of my head, Richa Jha's Middle, and so many books which are abstract, which just allow you to be on every page and think, can really can do that, and without giving you direct answers.
Thank you all very much. I enjoyed that. And on that note, that's a beautiful note to end. I'll just connect one thing that Kripa said now with what she said earlier. She mentioned the tribal voices. And that's really somewhere that we can go to learn how we can have an other than anthropocentric view of the world, because many tribal people are able to exist without that kind of anthropocentric viewpoint. And with that, I'd say thank you very much to our panelists, to Kripa, Likla, and Nandita, for a lovely and engaging discussion. I enjoyed that, and thank you, couple, for waiting. Thank you.